Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar says full disengagement achieved in eastern Ladakh and India-China ties are on the course of improvement. Adds the next priority for India would be to continue de-escalation. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi dedicates the successful implementation of 3 new criminal laws to the nation at a function in Chandigarh. And in Bangladesh, bail hearing of Chinmoy Das deferred by a month after no lawyer appeared in court for the hearing. As the Indian Parliament's winter session is underway, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar made a statement on India-China ties in the country's lower house today. Minister Jaishankar informed the Lok Sabha that full disengagement has been achieved in eastern Ladakh and India-China ties are on the course of improvement. He added that the next priority for India would be to continue de-escalation. He said that the conclusion of the disengagement in the border areas now allows us to consider other aspects of bilateral engagements.
Our relationship had progressed in many domains, but was obviously negatively affected by recent events. We are clear that the maintenance of peace and tranquility in border areas is a prerequisite for the development of our ties. In the coming days, we will be discussing both de-escalation as well as effective management of our activities in the border areas. The conclusion of the disengagement phase now allows us to consider other aspects of our bilateral engagement in a calibrated manner, keeping our national security interests first and foremost.
Minister Jaishankar also acknowledged that the defence and diplomatic arms of the Government of India worked in lockstep during negotiations with China.
In the negotiations with China, the defense and diplomatic arms worked in lockstep to ensure that our national interests were comprehensively met. So, in that context, the House would also recognize that there has been a significant improvement in the border infrastructure, which has made such effective counter-deployment possible.
The External Affairs Minister also elaborated on how the Government of India is ensuring the protection of borders through a mega border infrastructure push.
Work is progressing on some strategically important roads and airfields in Ladakh. The adoption of new technologies in high altitude, remote, inaccessible and permafrost areas has also been significant. All of this reflects the government's firm commitment to protecting our borders and ensuring that our armed forces get the facilities and the logistical support that they deserve.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday dedicated to the nation the successful implementation of the 3 new criminal laws aimed at reforming India's criminal justice system. These laws, Bharatiya Nyay Sanhita, Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita and Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam were implemented nationwide on 1st of July 2024. The Prime Minister attended an event in Chandigarh marking the successful implementation of the new criminal laws. Speaking on the occasion, Prime Minister Modi said that the new criminal laws signify the end of colonial era laws.
आजाद देश में गुलामों के लिए बने कानूनों को क्यों ढोया जाए? ये सवाल न हमने खुद से पूछा, न शासन कर रहे लोगों ने इस पर विचार करने की जरूरत समझी। गुलामी की इस मानसिकता ने भारत की प्रगति को, भारत की विकास यात्रा को बहुत ज्यादा प्रभावित किया। साथियों, देश अब उस कॉलोनियल माइंडसेट से बाहर निकले, राष्ट्र के सामर्थ्य का प्रयोग राष्ट्र निर्माण में हो, इसके लिए राष्ट्रीय चिंतन आवश्यक था और इसलिए मैंने 15 अगस्त को लाल किले से गुलामी की मानसिकता से मुक्ति का संकल्प देश के सामने रखा था.
Further, the Prime Minister noted that with these new laws, it is mandatory to frame charges within 60 days of the first hearing for crimes against women, such as that of rape. Additionally, judgments must be delivered within 45 days after the hearing concludes.
अब महिलाओं के खिलाफ बलात्कार जैसे घृणित अपराधों में पहली हियरिंग से 60 दिन के भीतर चार्ज फ्रेम करने ही होंगे. सुनवाई पूरी होने के 45 दिनों के भीतर भीतर फैसला भी सुनाया जाना अनिवार्य कर दिया गया है.
In Bangladesh, an advocate, Regan Acharya, was seriously injured in the court premises in Chittagong while seeking the bail hearing of Chinmoy Krishnadas Brahmachari. As per sources, extremists destroyed advocate Regan Acharya's private chamber. The court deferred the petition for a month on January 2nd. Chinmoy Das, a religious leader in Bangladesh, was arrested in Dhaka on 25th November on sedition charges by the Mohammad Yunus-led interim government in the country. He was denied bail by a court last week. There were many lawyers from the minority community who had accompanied Chinmoy Das while he was first produced at Chattogram Metropolitan Court on 26th of November. But after that, the police have arrested most of them on the pretext of various cases of violence and vandalism on the court premises. On to Syria now. Syrian and Russian jets have intensified air attacks in Idlib city and positions in Aleppo as the government of President Bashar al-Assad tries to slow the advance of opposition fighters. The raids on Monday followed big gains by the opposition over the past few days that have greatly shifted the front line in Syria's long-running conflict. The dramatic advance by a coalition of Syrian opposition groups led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has slowed in the past 24 hours. However, opposition fighters are still on the outskirts of Hamas south of Aleppo. Elsewhere, they have seized most of the city of Tel Rifat, where Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces are calling for a humanitarian corridor to allow Kurds to safely evacuate. The US State Department on Monday said that it wants to see a political process to end Syria's civil war after rebel fighters made gains in the city of Aleppo.
In the immediate term, what we want to see are de-escalation and protection of civilians and minority groups. But our overall policy remains the same, is that we want to see a serious and credible political process to end this civil war once and for all, with a political settlement consistent with United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254. As you know, Sean, that resolution calls for process facilitated by the United Nations, where the Syrian regime and the opposition groups would negotiate a path forward for Syria.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said on Monday that Iran will do whatever it can to create security and peace for the territorial integrity of all countries, without specifying which country he was referring to. Pezeshkian sat down for an interview with a local Iranian channel after it was earlier reported that he spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin about the escalating situation in Syria.
The territorial integrity of all countries is respected, and we should not allow the territorial integrity of any country to be violated under any pretext. As a result, we will do whatever we can to create security and peace and confront terrorists. But despite all these circumstances, we are trying to prove to them that we are not looking for war and unrest. We are looking for peace and security. The mischief that Europeans are doing is to prevent us from being able to solve our problems in our country with power. And they want to create so many problems for us so that they could make people skeptical about us and our government.
Next, on to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where the United States and Ukrainian defense chiefs discussed Russia's use of new ballistic missiles. This meeting came a day after the United States announced a new $725 million military aid package for Ukraine. It includes anti-personnel landmines, Stinger missiles, counter-drone systems and artillery ammunition. However, on the latest aid package, Kremlin spokesperson said that Biden administration is adding fuel to fire.
The current administration is pursuing its own goals, its own consistent line to prevent this war from slowing down. The administration is doing everything possible to continue to add oil to the fire. At the same time, this and all other aid packages cannot change the course of events, cannot affect the dynamics on the fronts.
Meanwhile, NATO foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels on Tuesday to discuss Ukraine's membership to the alliance and the West Asia crisis as well. Ukraine sees NATO membership as the best guarantee of its future security. Ahead of the meeting, NATO chief Mark Rutte called on allies to step up military support to strengthen Kiev's position.
Ukraine is entering another crucial winter, and Russia's aggression shows no sign of abating. Just the opposite. Putin is ramping up his rhetoric and reckless actions. He is using Ukraine as a testing ground for experimental missiles and is deploying North Korean soldiers in this illegal war. But we will all need to do more, especially now. The stronger our military support to Ukraine is now, the stronger their hand will be at the negotiating table. And the sooner we can end Russian aggression once and for all in Ukraine.
On to West Asia now. Israel and Hezbollah exchanged strikes as ceasefire violations mount in the region. Israeli military said on Monday that it was currently striking terror targets in Lebanon. The announcement comes after a Hezbollah attack earlier in the day targeted an Israeli military position in a disputed area on the Israel-Lebanon border, the group's first since the truce took effect on Wednesday. However, the United States said that it believed a ceasefire was still holding in Lebanon and that it was looking at potential violations.
Broadly speaking, it has been successful in stopping the fighting and getting us on a path where we are not seeing the just daily loss of life that we had seen for 2 months prior. Now, with respect to violations or potential violations of the ceasefire, we set a mechanism up to look into this very question, where the United States, along with France, will engage with the Israeli military, will engage with the Lebanese military to look at potential violations. What we are doing is engaging through this mechanism to look at all of these reports of violations of the ceasefire and deal with them through the channels that the mechanism set up, and that's what we'll do over the coming days.
The United States on Monday launched its third crackdown in 3 years on China's semiconductor industry, curbing exports to 140 companies, including chip equipment maker Nora Technology Group, among other moves.
The crackdown is one of the Biden administration's last large-scale efforts to stymie China's ability to access and produce chips that can help advance artificial intelligence for military applications or otherwise threaten US national security. It comes just weeks before the swearing in of Republican President-elect Donald Trump, who is expected to retain many of Biden's tough-on-China measures. Let's take a look at the biggest actions being taken, according to the US Commerce Department. New controls will be placed on semiconductor manufacturing equipment, software tools needed to produce advanced node integrated circuits. Another rule in the package restricts high bandwidth memory used in AI chips that correspond with what is known as HBM2. The 140 new entrants on the Commerce Department's entity list include semiconductor fabrication plants, also known as fabs, semiconductor tool companies, and investment companies which pose a risk to US and allied national security. Chinese private equity firm Wise Road Capital, tech firm Wingtech Technology Co., and JAC Capital were added. While the companies seeking licenses to ship to firms on the entity list generally get denied. The new rule will allow the US to regulate any item shipped to China from overseas if it contains any US chips. The expanded foreign direct product rule will apply to 16 companies on the entity list that are seen as the most important to China's most advanced chip-making ambitions. Equipment made in Israel, Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan is subject to the rule, while Japan and the Netherlands will be exempt. The rule will also lower the amount of US content that determines when certain foreign items are subject to US control. With our Tirana's report, Siddharth Bharadwaj, DD India.
Still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Georgia's Prime Minister rules out the possibility of talks amid protests across the country over joining EU. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant says Global South has emerged as an engine of global growth. And President of India confers the national awards to persons with disabilities in New Delhi. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I am Tanvi Taneja. Georgian Prime Minister Irakil Kobakids on Monday ruled out the possibility of talks between the government and the opposition, which has boycotted the parliament and backed street protests.
No negotiations. Remember the deadlocked negotiations from 2021 when we were forced to leave the constitutional framework. Of course, the opposition does not have any resources for this today. Our proposal is open for public discussion.
Protesters gathered in Tbilisi for the fifth consecutive night on Monday to rally against the government's decision to suspend talks on joining the European Union. Georgian law enforcement was seen using water cannons to disperse the protesters demonstrating in front of the parliament. Protesters also demanded fair elections over their dissatisfaction with the government's handling of their demands. French Finance Minister François Armand said on Tuesday that the country is at a critical juncture due to uncertainty over the country's budget and the future of the government. The government of French Prime Minister Michel Barnier is facing collapse after right and left-wing parties have promised to put forward a no-confidence vote against it amid a budget dispute.
I think we have finally reached the moment of truth, which puts everyone in front of their responsibilities. It's now up to you, the nation's lawmakers, to decide if our country adopts a responsible budget bill, indispensable and useful for our fellow citizens, or if we rather enter into unknown territory. I sincerely think the French will not forgive us for putting the interests of individuals before the future of the country.
Romanian opposition hard-right leader George Simion said on Tuesday that his party would like to be in a governing coalition, but it rules out a coalition with Social Democrats. The ruling leftist Social Democrat Party won Sunday's parliamentary election, but far-right parties gained a third of seats in the new legislature. Romania's constitutional court on Monday validated the shock first-round result in the country's presidential election. It will set the stage for a runoff vote on December 8th that could upend its pro-Western orientation and undermine backing for Ukraine. Ireland's general election concluded late Monday after 3 days of vote counting. The incumbent centre-right parties Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are set to retain power following coalition expected to take place in the coming weeks. Immigration became a major issue during this election campaign. All 174 seats in the lower house of parliament were decided during Friday's polls, with Fianna Fáil taking 48 seats, well ahead of the main opposition left-wing nationalist Sinn Féin, who won 39 seats, while Fine Gael got 38 seats only. Support for the Green Party, the third coalition partner of the outgoing government, collapsed. The The President of India conferred the national awards to persons with disabilities in New Delhi on Tuesday. The event took place on the occasion of the International Day for Persons with Disabilities.
The world is celebrating International Day of Persons with Disabilities on Tuesday. To mark the occasion, the President of India, Draupadi Murmu, conferred national awards for empowering persons with disabilities to 33 individuals and institutions in New Delhi. Speaking on the occasion, the President talked about the importance of empowerment.
इन पुरस्कारों को बहुत व्यापक सामाजिक महत्व है। आज के पुरस्कार विजेता समाज के सामने रोल मॉडल के रूप में प्रतिष्ठित हो रहे हैं। इनका अनुकरण करके अन्य व्यक्ति और संस्थान दिव्यांगजनों के सशक्तिकरण की दिशा में आगे बढ़ सकते हैं। दिव्यांगजन में उद्यमिता यानी एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप को बढ़ावा देने, उनका कौशल विकास करने, उन्हें रोजगार दिलाने, उनके उत्पादों की खरीद को प्रेफरेंस देने की व्यवस्था करने तथा मार्केटिंग की सुविधाएं प्रदान करने से उनमें नेतृत्व की क्षमता बढ़ेगी।
The National Awards 2024 were presented in two major categories: National Awards for Individual Excellence and National Awards for Institutional Excellence. The awardees expressed their gratitude on being bestowed the honor.
This award is very important for us because it is definitely a pat on the back of on all those individuals who are taking this award today. It will be like creating more opportunities for us to be more stronger, to come out with flying colors and to achieve victory.
This is a recognition for all those 1200 plus Divyang Udyami who have started their journey, and they decided to change the mindset of the society from taker and started a journey of from taker to giver. So this is a truly recognition for them, and also the ecosystem that we are building, that everything and anything is possible if inclusion and accessibility mindset is there in the country.
India's Minister for Social Justice and Empowerment, Dr. Virendra Kumar, also unveiled 16 transformative initiatives aimed at enriching the lives of persons with disabilities. These initiatives are poised to transform the landscape of inclusive education, technology, and employment, paving the way for a more empowered and self-reliant future for persons with disabilities. Deepika Mehto's report for DD India.
More news from New Delhi. On day 2 of the CII Partnership Summit, India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant addressed a session on development through South-South collaboration. Kant said that Global South has emerged as an engine of global growth due to their demographic advantage.
First point I want to make is that if you look at the IMF forecast for this year, the world is going to grow, the global growth is going to be 3.2%. The developed and advanced countries are going to grow at 1.8%, but the global south is going to grow at 4.4%. And what is both IMF and World Bank are saying is that for the next 3 decades, 3/4 of the global growth will come from emerging markets, low and middle income countries, that is the global south. And that is simply because 3/4 of the global growth is going to come from the global south simply because of the demographics. The population in these countries is young, whereas the population in the global north has aged and is aging.
With reference to the debt crisis faced by many developing countries, Amitabh Kant said that debt restructuring for the global south is critical to achieve sustainable development goals.
If you look at the debt, there are 18 countries of the global south whose interest payment is more than their outlay for education, and there are 44 countries where the interest payment is more than their outlay for health. And therefore, if the sustainable development goals, the 2030 sustainable development goals have to be achieved, that debt has to be entirely restructured. Without that, it is impossible to achieve the sustainable development goals.
Ahead of the Navy Day celebrations, India's Chief of Defence Staff, along with the 3 service chiefs, laid a wreath at the National War Memorial on Tuesday, paying tribute to the brave sacrifices of naval personnel. On this day, in the year 1971, the Indian Navy boldly attacked Pakistan's main port city, Karachi. This operation demonstrated India's growing naval might, in addition to being a major military triumph. The celebration honours the bravery of those who serve in the Navy and endure significant hardships while defending the nation's maritime security. And in hockey, India will clash with Malaysia in the Men's Junior Asia Cup semi-finals in Muscat on Tuesday. India have remained unbeaten in the tournament, winning all their 4 games. They have been the most successful team in the tournament history with 4 titles. The tournament doubles up as a qualifier for the next year's Hockey Junior World Cup, which will be hosted by India. Meanwhile, Pakistan will take on Japan in another semi-finals on Tuesday. Now, before we go, India's public broadcaster Prasar Bharati has recently launched Waves, entering the field of OTT platform. Waves provides a complete infotainment ecosystem to digital media and OTT audiences. If you also want great content for free, then you can download Waves today. That's all for this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can download our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. From all of us here in New Delhi, thank you for watching. Namaskar.